The massive conference room aboard the Galactic Council's flagship hummed with alien laughter. Commander Zektar of the Kron Empire stood at the center, his four arms crossed over his crystalline chest as he projected holographic images of Earth's military forces. "Look at them," Zektar said, his voice dripping with amusement. "They still use chemical propulsion for their spacecraft. Their fastest vessels take months to travel between their own planets." The assembled military leaders from across the galaxy erupted in fresh waves of laughter. The Vorthan delegation's tentacles writhed with mirth, while the cybernetic machina representatives emitted harmonious chimes of superiority. General Sarah Mitchell sat quietly in the corner, the sole human representative in the room. Her weathered face remained expressionless as she watched the display. The other species had invited humanity to this gathering as a formality, a gesture of pity toward the newest spacefaring race to discover faster-than-light travel. "Their weapons," continued Zektar, switching to images of human military equipment, "are primitive projectile-based systems. No plasma cannons, no antimatter bombs, no quantum disruptors. They throw pieces of metal at each other." Ambassador Thrix of the Celestial Hegemony floated forward, her ethereal form shimmering. "Perhaps we should establish a protectorate over their system. For their own safety, of course. Such a primitive species could hurt themselves playing with technologies beyond their understanding." General Mitchell finally stood, her movement drawing attention from the assembled aliens. At barely 6 feet tall, she was dwarfed by most species in the room. The Kron warriors stood at 9 feet, while the Vorthans stretched even taller with their tentacles extended. "You finished?" Mitchell asked, her voice calm. The room fell silent. Most species considered it poor form for such a young race to speak without being directly addressed. Zektar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. "The human wishes to speak. How? Quaint." Mitchell walked to the center of the room, her military boots clicking against the polished floor. She pulled out a small device and activated her own holographic display. "You're right about our technology," she said. "We don't have plasma weapons or faster-than-light missiles. Our ships are slow and our guns shoot metal slugs." The aliens exchanged amused glances, wondering why the human would admit to such weakness. "But you're missing something important," Mitchell continued. The hologram showed Earth, a blue marble floating in space. "We've been killing each other with those primitive weapons for thousands of years. We've gotten very, very good at it." The display changed, showing human history. Wars, conflicts, innovations born from necessity and desperation. "The Kron Empire has existed for 50,000 years, Mitchell said, nodding to Zektar. "In your entire history, you've fought 17 major wars. Humanity has fought over 15,000 wars in just the last 6,000 years." The laughter in the room began to fade. The machina achieved spaceflight 3,000 years ago and immediately formed a peaceful collective, Mitchell continued. "Humans achieved spaceflight while in the middle of a Cold War that could have ended our civilization. We pointed enough nuclear weapons at ourselves to destroy our planet 20 times over, and we called it deterrence." She changed the display again, showing human soldiers throughout history. "Every advancement in your civilizations came from cooperation, from shared knowledge and peaceful development. Every advancement in human history came from finding more efficient ways to kill each other. Then we turned those weapons into tools. And then we made better weapons." Admiral Krex of the Vorthan fleet spoke up, his translator rendering his bubbling speech into words. "Surely you don't think your primitive nature is something to boast about?" Mitchell smiled. And several aliens stepped back unconsciously. They'd seen predators smile before, but there was something different about the human expression. 3 months ago, your automated probe entered our system," Mitchell said. "Your technology detected our radio signals, analyzed our languages, and made first contact. Very impressive." She pulled up new images. What your probe didn't detect were the 17 stealth satellites that tracked it from the moment it entered our system. It didn't notice the 3 attack submarines we retasked to space defense. It definitely didn't catch the fact that we reverse-engineered its communication system in 72 hours. The room was completely silent now. You see, Mitchell said, humans have a saying. It's not about the size of the dog in the fight, it's about the size of the fight in the dog. You have better technology. You have bigger ships. You have energy weapons that make our nukes look like firecrackers. She paused, meeting the eyes of each species representative. But you've forgotten how to fight. You've had peace for so long that war is just a theory to you. For humans, war is breathing. It's in our blood, our bones, our very DNA. We don't just practice war, we perfect it. Zektar's 4 hands clenched into fists. You dare threaten the Galactic Council? Threaten? Mitchell laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. No, Commander, this is education. You invited us here to laugh at the primitive humans. I'm explaining why that's a mistake. She brought up one final image, a map of human space, showing the colonies and outposts humanity had established in just 50 years since achieving faster-than-light travel. We spread faster than any species in Council history, not because our technology is better, but because we're used to hostile environments. Every human colony is a fortress. Every human ship is built for war first, exploration second. Every human child learns strategy through games before they can properly walk. The celestial hegemony ambassador floated higher, her form flickering with agitation. The Council maintains peace through superior firepower. No species would dare. No species has been desperate enough, Mitchell interrupted. No species has been forged in the kind of crucible that created humanity. You achieved space travel and found friends. We achieved space travel and found we were alone. Do you know what humans do when we're alone and threatened? She let the question hang in the air. We get creative, we get desperate, and we get mean. The display showed human military doctrine, adaptation strategies, and guerrilla warfare tactics that had been refined over millennia. Your plasma cannons are powered by exotic matter that needs to be harvested from specific stellar phenomena, Mitchell said. Very efficient, very powerful. Do you know what powers human weapons? Chemistry. Basic elements we can find anywhere. We could lose 90% of our infrastructure and still keep fighting. Can you say the same? Zektar stepped forward, towering over Mitchell. You speak boldly for a race that could be eliminated with a single fleet action. Mitchell didn't step back. Maybe. But let me tell you what would happen first. The moment your fleet entered our system, every human in the galaxy would know. Not because of our technology, but because we've been paranoid about alien invasion for centuries. We have contingency plans for contingency plans. She pulled up classified human military documents, causing several aliens to react with surprise that she would reveal such information. Operation Samson. In the event of overwhelming alien aggression, every human ship becomes a weapon. Not a military vessel, a weapon. We've rigged our civilian freighters with nuclear self-destructs. Our colony ships can be converted to kinetic kill vehicles with 6 hours' notice. Every space station is designed to be broken apart and turned into relativistic projectiles. The human general's voice grew harder. You could destroy Earth, yes. But we've spread to over 300 systems now. Each one is prepared to turn every ship, every station, every asteroid into a weapon. We wouldn't win, but we'd make victory cost more than you're willing to pay. She turned off the display and looked around the room. But more importantly, you're thinking like civilized beings. You're thinking about fleet battles and superior firepower. You want to know what humans would really do. The aliens waited, tension filling the air. We'd steal your technology. Not to copy it, to break it. We'd find the vulnerabilities you never thought to protect against because no civilized species would think to exploit them. We'd turn your own systems against you. We'd make viruses for your computers, diseases for your bodies, mimetic weapons for your minds. Mitchell walked back toward her seat. We'd fight in ways that would horrify you. Because to you, war is politics by other means. To us, war is survival by any means. She sat down and smiled pleasantly. But please continue your presentation about our primitive technology. I'm sure it's very educational. The silence stretched for long moments. Finally, Zektar deactivated his holographic display. The other species representatives began murmuring among themselves, casting uncertain glances at the lone human. Admiral Krex was the first to speak. Perhaps we should discuss the terms of humanity's full membership in the Galactic Council. A wise suggestion. Ambassador Thrix added quickly. As fellow spacefaring races, we should work together for mutual benefit. Mitchell nodded graciously. Humanity would be honored to contribute to galactic peace and prosperity. The meeting continued, but the tone had shifted completely. No one laughed at humanity's technology now. They were too busy recalculating their threat assessments and wondering what other surprises the newest member of the galactic community might have in store. As the various delegations filed out, Zektar approached Mitchell. Your words today, were they truth or threats? The Kron commander asked. Mitchell stood to face him. Both. Humanity wants peace, Commander. We've had enough war to last us lifetimes. But we're very, very good at it. It's better for everyone if we focus that expertise on common threats rather than each other. Zektar studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. I believe I understand. Your species evolved not in spite of your violent nature, but because of it. You weaponized evolution itself. Something like that, Mitchell agreed. We prefer to think of it as aggressive problem-solving. The commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. I think the galaxy has underestimated humanity. That's okay, Mitchell said. We're used to being underestimated. It's actually something of an advantage. As she left the conference room, General Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. The first phase was complete. The galaxy now knew that humanity, despite its primitive technology, was not to be trifled with. They'd established themselves as dangerous enough to respect but reasonable enough to work with. Back on Earth, the real preparations continued. Research teams worked around the clock reverse engineering alien technology. Military strategists updated their contingency plans with new information about potential threats. Colony ships were built with hidden weapons systems and redundant survival capabilities. Humanity had learned its greatest lesson long ago. In a universe full of unknowns, paranoia was just another word for preparation. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's primitive technology. They wouldn't make that mistake again. But more importantly, they'd learned something crucial about the newest members of their community. Humans didn't need advanced technology to be dangerous. They'd been dangerous all along. Technology just made them more efficient at it. In the weeks that followed, several species quietly updated their diplomatic protocols regarding humanity. Trade agreements were offered with surprisingly favorable terms. Technology sharing programs were proposed. Defensive alliances were suggested. The Galactic Council had maintained peace through superior firepower for millennia. But now they faced something new. A species that had turned warfare into an art form, paranoia into a survival trait, and desperation into innovation. And perhaps most unsettling of all, these humans seemed genuinely friendly. They wanted peace, trade, cultural exchange. They sent their children to study at alien universities and invited other species to Earth. They shared their music, their art, their literature. But every species that visited human space noticed the same things. The way human ships were built with redundant systems that could serve military purposes. The way every human colony was positioned for maximum defensive advantage. The way human children played strategy games that would make seasoned military commanders pause in appreciation. Earth had joined the galactic community with a smile and an extended hand of friendship. But behind that smile was the accumulated experience of a species that had spent its entire existence preparing for threats, real and imagined. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Never laugh at the primitive species. They might just be the most dangerous ones of all. 6 months after the Galactic Conference, the distress signal reached every corner of Council space simultaneously. The Nexus Station, a massive trading hub on the edge of known space, had gone dark. Last reports spoke of unknown attackers, ships that appeared from nowhere, and weapons that bypassed every known defense. Commander Zektar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Pride of Kron, watching the assembled fleet. 47 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, representing 12 different species. Enough firepower to crack a moon in half. Sir, the human vessel is requesting permission to join the fleet, his communications officer announced. On the view screen appeared the USS Vengeance, a human battleship that looked almost comically primitive next to the sleek alien vessels. Where the Council ships were smooth and elegant, the human ship was all angles and armor plating, bristling with what looked like ancient projectile weapons. "This is Captain James Harrison," came the transmission. "We picked up the distress call. Request permission to assist." Zektar's first instinct was to refuse. What could one primitive human ship do that 47 advanced vessels couldn't? But he remembered General Mitchell's words from the conference. "Permission granted, Captain Harrison. Try to keep up." The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, arriving at the Nexus station in minutes. What they found made even veteran commanders pause. The station, large enough to house 30 million inhabitants, was surrounded by strange vessels. They were black, non-reflective, and seemed to shift and move in ways that hurt to look at directly. Debris from destroyed Council ships floated everywhere. "By the void," breathed Admiral Krex. "The Revenants. They're real." The Revenants were legend, stories told to frighten young species. Interdimensional raiders that appeared without warning, took what they wanted, and vanished. Most Council species had dismissed them as myth. "All ships, attack formation," Zektar commanded. "Full spread, maximum firepower." The Council fleet opened fire. Plasma beams, antimatter torpedoes, quantum disruptors. The most advanced weapons in known space lashed out at the enemy vessels and passed right through them. The Revenant ships flickered, phased, and reappeared behind the Council fleet. Their return fire was devastating. Where their weapons hit, ships didn't just explode, they ceased to exist, leaving holes in reality that hurt to perceive. "Shields are useless," someone screamed over comms. "They're hitting us in dimensions we can't even detect." 3 Council ships vanished in the first 10 seconds, then 5 more. The most advanced fleet in the galaxy was being torn apart like paper. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Zektar ordered, his heart's pounding. "We need to. This is Captain Harrison. Get your ships back. We're going to try something stupid." The human ship accelerated forward, straight at the Revenant fleet. Zektar watched in horror and confusion as the Vengeance opened fire with its primitive kinetic weapons. Chunks of metal flew through space at significant fractions of light speed. The projectiles passed through the Revenant ships just as the energy weapons had. But Harrison didn't stop firing. "Captain, your weapons are ineffective," Zektar transmitted. "Fall back. Not trying to hit them," Harrison replied. "Watch and learn." The human ship launched something else. Hundreds of small objects that scattered in all directions. They looked like ancient mines, physical objects floating in space. The Revenant ships ignored them, phasing through the field of debris as they pursued the retreating Council fleet. Then the mines detonated. But they didn't explode in any conventional sense. Instead, they released clouds of something, a glittering, spreading field of particles that expanded rapidly. When the Revenant ships passed through the clouds, something impossible happened. They flickered, solidified, and suddenly became visible to conventional sensors. "What did you do?" Zektar demanded. "Iron filings," Harrison said with satisfaction. "Billions of microscopic iron particles, magnetized and charged. Your fancy sensors showed us these things are phasing through dimensions, right? Well, humans learned something fighting each other. You can't phase through everything. Some materials interact with dimensional fields. We just had to find the right one." The now visible Revenant ships seemed confused, their movements becoming erratic. And in that moment of confusion, Harrison struck. "All kinetic batteries. Fire for effect. Target their phase generators, those crystalline structures on their hulls." The Vengeance erupted with firepower. Not elegant energy beams, but thousands of tungsten rounds accelerated to devastating velocities. The projectiles, enhanced by the dimensional disruption of the iron particles, slammed into the Revenant vessels. The enemy ships, so used to being untouchable, had never developed heavy armor. They shattered like glass under the kinetic barrage. Council fleet, the enemy is vulnerable. Harrison broadcast. Hit them now. While they're solid, the alien commanders, to their credit, adapted quickly. Energy weapons that had been useless moments before now found their targets. Revenant ships burned and died in real space, unable to phase away. But the battle was far from over. More Revenant vessels poured from tiers in space itself. And these had learned. They avoided the iron cloud, phasing in and out of reality to attack from unexpected angles. "We need to board the station," Harrison said. "They're using it as an anchor point. Destroy their connection, and they can't bring reinforcements." "Board the station?" Admiral Krex was incredulous. "In the middle of a battle?" "Welcome to human warfare," Harrison replied. "We do things the hard way." Vengeance actual to Marine Commander. Operation Trojan Horse is go. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human ship launched what looked like escape pods directly at the station. The Revenants, focused on the larger threat, ignored them. Why worry about a few primitive escape pods when there was a battle to win? The pods crashed into the station's hull and immediately began cutting through. But they weren't escape pods, they were breach pods filled with human Marines in powered armor. Major Alexandra Chen led the assault, her squad spreading through the station's corridors with practiced efficiency. The Revenants inside were tall, ethereal beings that seemed to exist partially in multiple dimensions at once. Their personal weapons could phase through armor and walls alike, but humans had spent millennia perfecting close-quarters combat. The Marines used flashbang grenades modified with iron powder, disrupting the Revenants' phasing abilities. They set up crossfires in corridors, used the station's own structure as cover, and most importantly, they fought dirty. "Remember," Chen told her troops, "we're not here to fight fair. We're here to win." They used the station's life support systems against the invaders, venting atmosphere in some sections and overpressurizing others. They turned maintenance robots into improvised explosives. They used the station's own internal defenses, hacking systems that the Revenants had thought secure. Meanwhile, in space, the battle had become a brutal slugfest. The Council fleet had adapted to human tactics, using their energy weapons when the Revenants were solid and dodging when they phased. The Vengeance continued to seed space with iron clouds, creating zones where the enemy couldn't phase. But it was the human ship's next move that truly turned the tide. "All Council vessels, clear minimum safe distance from the station," Harrison ordered. "We're about to do something inadvisable." The USS Vengeance turned toward the station and accelerated. Not to attack range, but beyond. The human battleship was on a collision course. "Captain Harrison, what are you doing?" Zektar demanded. "Old human tactic," Harrison replied calmly. "When you can't beat them with superior firepower, you ram them." The Vengeance struck the station at a significant fraction of light speed. But at the last moment, the ship's crew had abandoned it, launching in actual escape pods this time. The battleship itself had been turned into the largest kinetic weapon in the battle. The impact was catastrophic. The station's shields, designed to stop energy weapons, couldn't handle the sheer kinetic force. A huge section of the station crumpled, and with it, the dimensional anchors the Revenants had been using. The effect was immediate. Revenant ships throughout the battle space flickered and began to fade. Without their anchor, they couldn't maintain their presence in normal space. Some tried to flee back through their dimensional tiers, only to find them collapsing. Inside the station, Major Chen and her Marines pressed their advantage. They located the Revenant Command Center, where ethereal beings worked frantically at controls that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Surrender," Chen commanded, her weapon trained on what she hoped was the enemy commander. "Your anchor is destroyed. Your reinforcements are cut off. It's over." The lead Revenant turned to face her, its form shifting between states of matter. When it spoke, the words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You, primitives. You dare." "We dare," Chen confirmed, We've been daring since we came down from the trees. Now, are you going to surrender, or do we have to get creative?" The Revenant studied her, perhaps seeing something in humanity that the Council races had missed until recently. Here was a species that had turned limitation into strength, that had weaponized desperation itself. "We yield," the Revenant said finally. "We have underestimated this dimension's defenders." The battle was over. As Council ships secured the area and rescued survivors, the full scope of what had happened became clear. A fleet of the most advanced ships in the galaxy had been helpless against an interdimensional threat. It had taken human creativity, recklessness, and willingness to sacrifice to win the day. Captain Harrison and his surviving crew were brought aboard Zektar's flagship. The human officer looked tired but satisfied. "You destroyed your ship," Zektar said. "It wasn't an accusation, just an observation." "Ships can be replaced," Harrison replied. "Lives can't." "Well, most lives. We made sure everyone got to the escape pods first." "Your tactics were unorthodox." Harrison grinned. "You haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you see what we can do when we have time to actually plan." Around them, Council technicians were studying the captured Revenant technology, while human engineers were already figuring out how to weaponize the iron particle discovery. The battle had been won, but more importantly, a partnership had been forged. "Your General Mitchell was right," Zektar said after a moment. "Humanity's strength isn't in your technology. It's in your way of thinking. We prefer to call it aggressive problem-solving," Harrison said, echoing Mitchell's words. "When you can't match your enemy's strength, you find their weakness. When you can't find a weakness, you create one." The Kron commander looked at the human with new respect. "The galaxy needs that kind of thinking." "Good thing you've got us then," Harrison replied. "Though I should warn you, we're just getting started. Wait until our scientists get their hands on that Revenant tech. We'll probably find 16 ways to weaponize it that will horrify you." Zektar made a sound that might have been laughter. "I'm beginning to think that's exactly what we need." In the days that followed, the full report of the battle spread throughout Council space. The Revenants, who had been considered an unstoppable force of nature, had been defeated by human marines with modified flashbangs and a captain willing to turn his ship into a battering ram. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the shift in how the galaxy viewed humanity. They were no longer the primitive newcomers to be protected or patronized. They were the species you called when conventional warfare failed. When you needed someone to think outside the box, to fight dirty, to find victory in the impossible. The Galactic Council had spent millennia perfecting the art of civilized warfare. Humanity had spent millennia perfecting the art of winning by any means necessary. And in a universe full of unknown threats, that kind of thinking was invaluable. As reconstruction of the Nexus station began, human and alien engineers worked side by side. The humans suggested improvements, hidden weapon emplacements, structural redundancies, escape systems that could double as assault craft, the kinds of modifications that only a perpetually paranoid species would think of. And in the depths of space, in secure facilities across human space, scientists and soldiers studied the captured Revenant technology. They took apart the phase generators, analyzed the dimensional weapons, and began to imagine new applications. Because that was the thing about humans that the galaxy was beginning to understand. Give them an enemy's advantage, and they'd find a way to turn it against them. Give them advanced technology, and they'd find ways to use it that the creators never imagined. Give them a problem that couldn't be solved, and they'd solve it anyway, usually in a way that nobody saw coming. The Revenants had made the same mistake as the Galactic Council. They'd seen primitive technology and assumed primitive thinking. They'd learned, too late, that human creativity was its own form of advanced technology. And somewhere in the galaxy, other threats took notice. The humans had arrived on the galactic stage, and they played by different rules. Rules written in blood and desperation over thousands of years of conflict. The galaxy would never be the same. 1 year later, the galaxy faced its darkest hour. The Devourers had come. They weren't invaders in any traditional sense. They were a force of entropy itself, a civilization that had long ago transcended physical form and now existed as pure hunger. They moved from galaxy to galaxy, consuming energy, matter, and even the fabric of space-time itself. The first systems to fall simply vanished. Not destroyed, not conquered, gone. As if they had never existed. Entire star systems were wiped from reality, leaving only voids that light itself seemed afraid to enter. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session on Haven Prime, the most fortified world in known space. Representatives from every member species gathered, fear evident in their various forms of expression. 27 systems gone in 3 weeks, Admiral Krex reported, his tentacles pale with stress. No survivors, no debris, no trace they ever existed. Our most advanced scouts can't even approach the void zones without beginning to dissolve. Commander Zektar stood at the tactical display, his 4 hands working desperately at the controls. Every defense we've tried has failed. Energy weapons are absorbed, kinetic weapons disappear before impact. Even our most advanced reality anchors can only slow them down. Ambassador Thrix of the Celestial Hegemony floated above the assembly, her form flickering with distress. Perhaps we should consider evacuation, flee to another galaxy before they consume this one. And go where? Asked the Machina Collective through their speaker unit. Records from consumed galaxies show the devourers always follow. Running only delays the inevitable. It was then that General Mitchell spoke. She'd been promoted to Supreme Military Advisor for the Council, a position created specifically for her after the Revenant incident. "We're not running," she said simply. The room turned to her. The humans stood at the display, studying the pattern of destruction with the same calm intensity she'd shown at their first meeting. "General," with respect, Zektar began, "humanity's unconventional tactics won't work here. These aren't enemies you can outsmart or outfight. They're forces of nature." Mitchell smiled that predator's smile that had become famous across the galaxy. "Everything can be fought. You just have to find the right weapon." She activated her communicator. "Mitchell to all human forces. Execute Operation Last Stand. Authorization code. Prometheus Unbound." Across human space, things began to move. Ships launched from hidden bases. Weapons that violated 17 different council treaties were brought online, and most disturbingly, human colonies began evacuating their children and non-combatants. "What are you doing?" Ambassador Thrix demanded. "What humans do best," Mitchell replied. "We're getting desperate. And when humans get desperate, we get mean." The first phase of the human plan became apparent when a fleet of modified cargo haulers jumped into the void zone where the devourers were feeding. The council watched in horror as the human ships were immediately caught in the entropic field and began to dissolve. "You're sending your people to die for nothing," Krex protested. "Watch," Mitchell said coldly. The cargo haulers exploded, not with conventional weapons but with something else. The detonations released clouds of exotic matter, the same iron particles that had worked on the Revenants, but modified with captured interdimensional technology and something else, something that made Council scientists step back from their sensors. "Is that," one of them began. "Compressed strange matter," Mitchell confirmed. "Normally, it would convert everything it touches into more strange matter. We've modified it to only react with specific energy signatures. Specifically, the ones the devourers emit." The effect was immediate and terrifying. Where the strange matter touched the devourer's entropic field, it began to crystallize. The beings of pure hunger suddenly had physical form, and that form was spreading like an infection. The devourers recoiled, their first reaction to anything in eons. But the humans weren't done. Phase 2 began as hundreds of human ships jumped directly into the void zones. These weren't military vessels. They were civilian ships, freighters, even pleasure yachts. All of them had been converted into weapons. "You're sacrificing your entire fleet," Zektar said, unable to hide his horror. "Not sacrificing," Mitchell corrected. "Investing." Each ship carried human volunteers who knew they weren't coming back. As their vessels dissolved in the entropic field, they activated their payloads. Some released more strange matter. Others detonated antimatter bombs designed to disrupt space-time. Still others carried exotic weapons reverse-engineered from revenant technology. But the most devastating weapons weren't technological, they were biological. We call it the Prometheus virus, Mitchell explained as data flooded the tactical displays. Our scientists theorized that if the Devourers consume information along with matter and energy, we could poison that information. The virus was humanity's most horrific creation, a mimetic weapon that existed as both data and biological matter. It infected not just systems but the very concept of systems. And the Devourers, in their hunger, consumed it eagerly. The effect was like watching a force of nature get food poisoning. The smooth, inexorable advance of the void zones became erratic. The Devourers' perfect unity fractured as the virus spread through their collective consciousness, introducing concepts they'd never encountered: doubt, fear, and most devastatingly, individuality. "My God," breathed one of the council observers, "they're turning on each other." Parts of the Devourer collective, infected with human concepts of self-preservation, began consuming other parts. The void zones collapsed in on themselves as the beings of pure hunger discovered cannibalism. But the Devourers were ancient and powerful. They began adapting, fighting off the virus, rebuilding their unity. The human assault had hurt them but not stopped them. That's when General Mitchell revealed Phase 3. All human colonies, execute final protocol. It's been an honor serving with you. Across human space, on 300 worlds, human colonists activated devices they'd hoped never to use. Reality anchors reversed their function, becoming reality destroyers. Entire star systems began to implode, not into black holes but into something worse. Null zones where the laws of physics simply stopped. "You're destroying your own worlds," Thrix screamed. "To create a firebreak," Mitchell said, tears running down her face as she watched billions of humans die by their own choice. "The Devourers consume reality, so we're denying them reality to consume." The null zones spread, creating a barrier of absolute nothingness between the Devourers and the rest of the galaxy. Where the entropic force met the null zones, they found nothing to feed on. Worse, the null zones were growing, threatening to consume the Devourers themselves. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers faced starvation, but humanity wasn't done. As the alien representatives watched in stunned silence, human ships, military vessels this time, jumped directly into the Devourer collective. These ships carried humanity's most desperate weapon: volunteers who had been modified at the genetic level. "We call them Prometheus carriers," Mitchell explained. "Humans who have been altered to be irresistibly delicious to the Devourers, their bait." The Devourers, weakened by the virus and starving from the null zones, couldn't resist. They consumed the human volunteers eagerly, and learned too late that the humans had turned themselves into living bombs. Not physical explosives, but something far worse: carriers of compressed human experience. Every war, every desperate moment, every act of creativity born from suffering, downloaded directly into the Devourer collective consciousness. The beings who had transcended physical existence, who had moved beyond emotion and individuality, were suddenly flooded with the entire weight of human history. They experienced death, not just cessation of function, but the human understanding of mortality. They felt fear, rage, love, hope, and most devastatingly, the will to survive at any cost. The Devourer collective shattered. Beings of pure hunger became individuals, each struggling with newfound emotions and desires. Some fled into deep space. Others turned on their fellows. Many simply ceased to function, overwhelmed by the concept of existence as humans understood it. Within hours, the unstoppable force that had consumed galaxies was reduced to scattered, confused entities fleeing in all directions. The immediate threat was over, but the cost was staggering. Humanity had sacrificed 300 colonies, over 15 billion lives, and most of their fleet. The null zones they'd created would take centuries to safely collapse. leaving vast areas of space inaccessible. As reports came in, the Galactic Council sat in stunned silence. Finally, Ambassador Thrix spoke. You genocided yourselves to save us. Mitchell shook her head. Not genocide. Sacrifice. There's a difference. But the cost was calculated, Mitchell interrupted. Every human who died today volunteered. They knew what they were doing. That's what you still don't understand about us. She brought up displays showing the human colonies that remained, already mobilizing to rebuild. You see monsters where we see heroes. You see insanity where we see necessity. You mourn our losses while we honor our victories. Those 15 billion humans didn't die. They became eternal. Their sacrifice will be remembered for as long as humanity exists. Commander Zektar found his voice. But to use your own people as weapons. Every human is a weapon, Mitchell said simply. We just choose our targets carefully. The Devourers made the mistake of threatening not just humanity, but our friends, our allies, the galaxy we've come to call home. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every species representative. This is what we are. This is what we've always been. We're the species that will burn our own worlds to create a firebreak. We're the ones who will weaponize our own deaths. We're the people who will look at an unstoppable force and ask, but what if we stop it anyway? The human general stood straighter, and despite her tears, her voice was strong. You invited us into this galactic community. You laughed at our primitive weapons and our paranoid nature. But when the darkness came, when the impossible threatened everything we've all built together, humanity did what we've always done. We found a way. An ugly way, a costly way, but a way nonetheless. In the days that followed, as the galaxy began to rebuild and the scattered devourers were hunted down, the other species came to truly understand what humanity represented. They weren't just the warriors of the galaxy. They were its immune system, the ones willing to do the unthinkable to protect what mattered. Memorials were built on 1,000 worlds, honoring the human sacrifice. But more importantly, defensive doctrines were rewritten. Human paranoia was no longer mocked but integrated into galactic planning. Every colony began building the kind of last resort weapons that humans had always insisted on. And in the rebuilding human colonies, children grew up with new stories. Stories of the 15 billion who had stared into the face of entropy itself and said, "Not today." Stories of ordinary people who became weapons to save worlds they'd never see. The galaxy had learned the final lesson about humanity. They were indeed primitive, paranoid, and violent. But they were also capable of heroism on a scale that defied comprehension. When pushed to the brink, humans didn't break. They transformed into something terrifying and beautiful, something that could face down the hunger of gods and win through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Years later, when new threats emerged from the darkness between galaxies, the call would go out across Council space. Alert the humans. Tell them to start getting creative. And humanity would answer, as they always had, with solutions that nobody else would think of, costs that nobody else would pay, and a determination that burned brighter than dying stars. Because that's what humans did. They looked at the impossible, the unthinkable, the unbeatable, and they found a way to win anyway. Usually by doing something that horrified their allies almost as much as their enemies. The galaxy no longer laughed at humanity's primitive nature. Instead, they thanked whatever forces had shaped this impossible species, these living weapons who chose to point themselves outward rather than in. Humanity had turned the tables, not through superior technology, but through superior will. And in a universe full of predators, there was no greater asset than a species too stubborn to know when they were beaten, too creative to accept conventional limitations, and too willing to sacrifice to ever truly lose. The primitive apes from Earth had become the guardians of the galaxy, not despite their nature but because of it. And the universe would never be the same.